Every season in the NBA, you have players in the league that have more riding on their futures than others, as well as their success being paramount for their team's success because of their role, whether it be at a superstar level or even a glue guy role player. And for the Chicago Bulls, there are going to be a lot of players on the roster for which this season is going to be the most important for. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about which players have the most to prove and how critical this season will be, not only for them and their future, but also for the Bulls and their success this season. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, this question came about when I had Bulls insider Rob Schaefer on the channel the other day, and I asked him who on the Bulls would this season be the most important for, not only for this upcoming season, but for the future of their career. Because when you think about it, there are a lot of guys on this roster who have a lot riding on them in terms of how they show up this season. Because Zach Lavine showing up as the leader, now playing on a max level contract, he's one, or Patrick Williams, who the Bulls are really relying on to make that leap in his third year, or of course Lonzo Ball in his recovery from missing a lot of time last season. DeMar DeRozan, can he have a repeat of last season as well? Or what about Coby White and Nikola Vucevic, who are both players in contract years looking for extensions? Well, there is one guy in particular who I think has the most riding on him, because not only is this season and his performance going to be critical for the Bulls' success, but also for his career going forward. And spoiler alert, it's not Patrick Williams, even though if you caught my interview with Rob Schaefer, he felt that this season was going to be the most important for Patrick Williams, not only because he's the X factor for the Bulls, but also for his future as it relates to contract extensions and exposure around the league, which I do agree with. And I think this upcoming season is going to be huge for Patrick Williams to really show up and show that he's worth that high lottery pick that the Bulls used to select him, which at the time actually appeared out of nowhere. I actually discussed in a prior video that this really is the season for Patrick to show up well before he starts losing the Bulls fan base. Not really me, because I'm a big Patrick Williams fan and believe in the kid and that he has tons of potential, but generally speaking, Bulls fans are pretty fickle and impatient and will love a player one day and the next they want him off the team. Can't tell you how many people I saw talking up Coby White being a future star to now some of those fans calling him trash and wanting him traded ASAP. So anyway, I will talk about Patrick Williams and what this season means to him, as well as other Bulls players, but the player I want to focus on, who I believe is the most riding on him in this upcoming season, and it may be a surprise to some, but that's Nikola Vucevic. Now, I think most will agree that Vuce had a fairly underwhelming season last year for the Bulls, by his standards anyway. I mean, for most players, putting up 18-11, that's a great season, but when you saw Vucevic average near 25 and 12 last season on high efficiency, to then have that kind of dropout that he did this season is disappointing. And I should be clear, it wasn't just the numbers, because we talked about before this season that Vuce's numbers, at least as it relates to his scoring, were going to drop off purely based on the fact that you added DeMar DeRozan and of course Zach Lavine, who he had only played for less than half a season before that. Like, Vucevic was not going to be putting up 25 points per game on this Bulls roster. So it wasn't the numbers. I expected those to dip. It was the inefficiency and inconsistency that we saw from him is what disappointed me. He would have a really strong game one night and then followed up with 3 bad games where he would go 30% from the field or even lower. And it was because Vuce could not be relied upon on a nightly basis to pick up the scoring slack, especially shooting from outside, which the Bulls, that was a big reason they went after Vucevic, since not only was he a great rebounder, which they needed at the time, but he also could help spread the floor. And the Bulls needed him so many times last season when he was really their only big man, their only strong rebounders, and especially when Zach was out or not playing at 100% himself. And of course, teams started hounding DeMar because he was the main Bulls offensive weapon. You needed a guy like Vuce to step up in those moments and draw defenses away from DeMar and Zach, and also just being that scoring punch when DeMar and Zach were having off nights. But look, I don't want to just sit here and rag on Vuce, because I actually think he gets more criticism than he probably deserves, and I don't really think that he was probably used properly in most settings last season. There was just too much emphasis on him putting up threes and not enough attacking the basket, which he thrives in the most. And I talked about so many times in post-game videos this past season, why are the Bulls not feeding Vucevic in the post? Why is Vuce settling for so many outside shots? Like, the Bulls were a much better team on offense this past year when there was less focus on Vuce chucking up threes and having him operate in the paint. Not only that, I don't think Vucevic deserves all the criticism that he gets because he's still a damn good player. He's still one of the better big men in the league, even on a down year. And let's face it, without Vuce, this Bulls team likely doesn't finish above 500 and is a play-in team at best, even, again, on a down year that he had. Now, that's partially because the Bulls didn't really have any other options at center, which made Vuce's role all the more important. But the fact still remains that the Bulls don't have as good of a season as they did without Vucevic. Not with their small ball lineup anyway, when you're having Derrick Jones Jr. play the 5 or Tony Bradley getting starting level minutes. Now, why is this season so critical for Nikola Vucevic? Like, for a guy who is 31, he'll be 32 by the time the season starts, how could he have so much riding on him this season, this upcoming season, when he really only has a few good years left in him? Well, that's exactly why it's such an important season for Vuce, because not only is it about proving to the fans, and not even just to the fans, but also to executives around the NBA, more specifically the Bulls, that last season was just an off year for him. That he's still the all-star level player that the Bulls traded for, that he's not just going to be one of these players that falls off after they hit 30, that he's not going to be remembered as a busted or failed trade made on the part of the Bulls in which they gave up a young player and 2 first-round picks to get him. And more importantly, Vucevic needs to do this because he's heading into the final year of his contract, and this could very well be his last big payday as a free agent next offseason when he's 32. Vuce is coming off a 4-year, $100 million contract that he signed in 2019, and for a big man who can rebound at an elite level, score at a high clip, and hopefully can showcase he's still able to shoot it from deep consistently, that's a valuable player in this league that can still get a sizable contract, whether it's with the Bulls or not. Now, as it relates to the Bulls and this upcoming season, and why Vucevic is going to be so critical to the team's overall success, I've said it so many times on the channel now that you guys are probably getting sick of hearing it, but I believe that Vucevic is the X factor of this team. It's not Patrick Williams, it's not Alex Caruso. Lonzo Ball is right up there and being that X factor of the team, not saying that the other guys I just mentioned aren't important pieces and are needed for the Bulls' overall success. But when you look at what Vucevic brings to the floor and how pivotal to have a big man that draws defenses away from your primary scorers in Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. And I say this meaning Vuce is at his best, not so much what we saw last season, how inconsistent he was, but if Vuce can be at his best, he's being aggressive in the post. That's the other thing that I should have mentioned that bothered me last season, was that Vucevic just didn't play with the same level of aggression we saw when he was with the Magic. It was as if his confidence had been shot, knowing that he was struggling with his shot, and at times not finishing at the rim with easy floaters. The poor performance seemed to be getting to his head, despite him saying otherwise in post-game interviews, citing that he just needed to continue to work on his shot and that he'll be fine. His game will get back on track. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent, but if he's being aggressive in the post, playing with a high level of confidence, actually competing and holding his own when going up against the other great bigs in the league, in the East anyway, I should say, like Embiid, Bam Adebayo, Giannis, not saying he's going to stop these guys or be better than them, but at least being a strong enough presence in the paint that limits them. I mean, really, just having Vuce be another threat on this team, because Vuce, simply put, was not another threat for the Bulls that other teams needed to focus on defense last year. Here's the thing, if DeRozan and Lavine can play at the level we saw last year, at least before Lavine injured his knee, and of course it might be a tall order for DeRozan to actually be able to come out and play at the same level we saw last year as an all-NBA level type player, but if you have Lavine and DeRozan playing at an elite level, and you add Vucevic at his best, an all-star caliber level player, think of how much more of a threat the Bulls would be when you have 3 legitimate star-level players. And I say legitimate because Vuce was not playing like an all-star last year. You compound that with a healthy Lonzo Ball, Patrick Williams hopefully improving even further going into his 3rd season, and the depth that the Bulls added in free agency with Drummond and Dragic, it makes it all the more important for Vucevic and his game to take the Bulls to that next level, which is why I feel next season is going to be the most important for Vucevic, more so than anyone else on this roster, not only for himself and his future as it relates to getting under the big contract, but also for the Bulls as a whole and how far this team can go in the limited window they have, with both Vucevic and DeMar having just a few good years left in their career. And look, I wouldn't argue with you if you feel that Patrick Williams is the guy who has the most riding on him in this upcoming season. He absolutely does, for all the reasons I mentioned earlier, maintaining that fan support, it also being that critical year 3 where you see most great players make that jump from being a development project type player to full on NBA ready player that is ready to compete and contribute even on the highest stage in the postseason. Not only that, but the Bulls are really relying on Patrick to make that big leap, given the Bulls have very little depth at the 4, like I mentioned before. The moves they made over the offseason being limited to bringing in role players to strengthen the bench, you're going to need Patrick to take his game to the next level to really make the Bulls a true competitor in the East. And of course, Patrick Williams is going to be extension eligible next offseason, and if he shows up and demonstrates that he can potentially be a franchise cornerstone, he could be offered a sizable contract extension after his rookie deal expires. I also wouldn't argue if you said Lonzo Ball. I mean, this is Lonzo's chance to show that he's not an injury-prone player, that he can actually play a full season and be a huge piece for the Bulls and their success, get some recognition for the great work that he puts in, possibly in the form of an all-defensive team or even selected as an all-star. Like, that's the thing. Had Lonzo remained healthy, and not just last season, but a number of seasons since he's been in the NBA, since he hasn't really been able to stay healthy for a full season since he's been in the league, but when Lonzo is playing at his best, he's one of the better perimeter and point of attack defenders in the league. He could easily have been selected to an all-defensive team had he remained healthy and kept up his defensive effort that we saw at the beginning of the year, at least in the first 30 games or so before getting injured. So yes, Lonzo also has a lot riding on him this season. Contract-wise, doesn't really impact him all that much, given that he still has 3 years left on his deal, but still an important season for him nonetheless. And yes, you could even add players like Zach Lavine and Coby White having a lot riding on them this season. Zach, first year of a max contract. There are going to be even higher expectations and pressure to perform well and lead this team to the next level. Coby White, a lot to prove as far as all the doubters about his abilities. He's also playing in a contract year, most likely to be a restricted free agent, as I would say it's unlikely the Bulls offer him an early extension this offseason. So yes, this is an important season for Coby and his future. That is if he doesn't get traded beforehand. Or who knows? You might even say DeMar DeRozan has a lot to prove this year as well in showing that he can still play at the level we saw last season. And not only that, but also end the DeMar DeRozan narrative that he goes MIA in the playoffs. Honestly, if you came at me in the comments and said any one of these guys that I just mentioned has the most riding on them this season, I can't say you're too far off, but in my personal opinion, this season is going to be the most important in terms of his future, financial success, as well as the Bulls team success, is Nikola Vucevic. But you let me know in the comments, who do you think this season will be the most important for on this roster? Also, let me know what you guys think of the new background music. I finally decided to switch it up after all this time since starting the channel. And also be sure to subscribe, as I'm trying to hit 30,000 subscribers by the start of the season. Until then, guys, I will catch you in the next one.